The story begins by showing a beautiful woman in her 20s named Kim Sala waking up. On that day, Sala is getting ready for work, but before that, she takes care of her unemployed father. Sala is a tough woman who faces financial difficulties and has to work to support her family. Currently, her father is asking for money because he wants to get married again. Sala works as a graphic designer, and she is admired by many for her warm personality and ability to get along well with others. At her workplace, there is a girl who is very cold and shy, always keeping to herself and seemingly avoiding Sala and others. This girl is named Ji-yoon. After finishing work, Sala goes home with her co-worker named Do-sik. At that time, Do-sik asks about Sala's love story, mentioning that she is very close to a popular man named Jae-shan, who is handsome and wealthy. Sala then tells her one-sided love story. Although Sala's love story hasn't gone smoothly, she still believes that if she and Jae-shan meet again, she can win his heart. Unbeknownst to them, Jae-shan overhears their conversation. Sala notices Jae-shan's presence and feels embarrassed, so she leaves from there. However, on her way, Sala realizes that she can't lie to herself. Therefore, she decides to go to Jae-shan's cafe. Jae-shan is shown as a cold and indifferent man who doesn't have very close friends. Sala continues to observe Jae-shan from afar, but she can only love him without having him. At that moment, a proud woman appears and abandons a white cat with Jae-shan. This woman turns out to be Jae-shan's ex-girlfriend returning the cat that Jae-shan had given her. As night falls, Jae-shan takes care of the cat. Initially, he doesn't want to take care of the cat because it reminds him of his ex. Sala, who knows about this, feels sorry. During the night on their way somewhere, Sala stops Jae-shan. Sala doesn't want the person she likes to remember his ex, so she asks to take care of the cat. When they arrive home, the cat runs off and Sala immediately takes a shower to get rid of her scent. While Sala is showering, someone under the bed takes her towel. The cat that Sala had brought with her turns out to be a shape-shifting cat who had just broken free from a curse. The next day, before going to work, Sala has an argument with her father because he plans to sell the apartment for his wedding expenses. The shape-shifting cat inadvertently overhears the argument. After Sala leaves, the cat transforms into a human. The shape-shifting cat explores every room in the apartment until he opens a door and finds Sala's father lying unconscious. The shape-shifting cat immediately carries Sala's father outside. Outside the apartment, a neighbor finds Sala's unconscious father and takes him to the hospital. Meanwhile, Sala, resting with Do-sik, receives a phone call informing her that her father is in the hospital. Upon hearing the news, Sala rushes to the hospital. Upon arriving at the hospital, Sala is very surprised because she meets her father's girlfriend there. They then introduce themselves. From this, Sala learns that her father's girlfriend deeply loves her father. In fact, she is faithfully by his side, taking care of him even until the night. The scene shifts, revealing the shape-shifting cat's newfound ability to transform at will. As Sala, her beauty radiating despite her sadness, walks past, the shape-shifting cat becomes entranced and quietly follows her. Sala, her heart heavy with sorrow, settles by the river, and the shape-shifting cat takes a seat beside her. Believing that the person sitting beside her is Jae-shan, she begins to open up and confide in him. She shares her recent discovery of her father's serious heart condition and talks about her father's boyfriend, who appears to genuinely care for him. When Sala turns her face, she is astonished to find her pet cat by her side. In that moment, she decides to consider the cat her companion, providing her with some solace during her loneliness. Several days have passed, and Sala's father has now married, officially selling their apartment. Her father will reside in his new wife's house, while Sala is offered a new home by her stepmother. With reluctance, she moves into the house provided by her stepmother, realizing that she lacks the savings to buy her own place. Surprisingly, her new residence is situated directly across from Jae-shan's cafe. Sala can hardly believe she will be living so close to Jae-shan from now on. The following day, prior to heading to work, Sala prepares all the necessities for her cat, whom she now considers her friend. Despite occasional annoyances from the cat, Sala consistently takes good care of it. Meanwhile, the shape-shifting cat, now capable of transforming at will, notices that Sala has left her phone behind. Feeling sorry for her, the cat grabs her phone and rushes to catch up with Sala. Upon arriving at her workplace, Sala receives a reprimand from her boss, due to her recent work absences. Consequently, she has to put in overtime to catch up on her tasks. Sala, working as a graphic designer, receives a photo of a cat as her work assignment. This reminder of a cat makes her miss her own pet. As night falls, Sala can't focus on work and is overwhelmed by a deep longing for her cat. Meanwhile, her cat eagerly awaits her return, and the hours pass, but she hasn't come home yet. Sala continues working into the night, eventually working overtime until morning. On this particular morning, heavy rain pours outside. Back at Sala's home, the shape-shifting cat becomes increasingly anxious as Sala still hasn't returned. Determined to help her, the cat decides to pick her up at the bus stop, armed with an umbrella. When Sala disembarks from the bus, someone unexpectedly shields her from the rain, though to her disappointment, it turns out to be Jay-Sean. The shape-shifting cat, witnessing Sala with another man, can't help but feel sad. It appears that the cat has developed feelings for Sala. Its sorrow deepens as it observes Jay-Sean wiping a raindrop from Sala's cheek. Back at Sala's house, she notices that her cat hasn't eaten its food. Sala decides to offer the cat some milk, and fortunately, the cat accepts it. While gazing at her adorable pet cat, Sala finally decides to give it a name, Hongjo.
공주야.
Later that night, a sleep-deprived Sala began to feel unwell, coming down with a fever. While searching for medicine, she noticed Hongjo lying weakly. Sala, upon seeing Hongjo's illness, disregarded her own health and hurriedly took him to the veterinary hospital. After receiving treatment, Sala returned home and tucked Hongjo into bed. Despite still feeling unwell herself, she chose to sleep on the floor so that Hongjo could be comfortable. As Sala drifted off to sleep, Hongjo watched over her and started taking care of her. By morning, Sala's fever had subsided and she had recovered. After feeding Hongjo, she received a message from Jay-Sean, informing her that he had sent medicine for her. Having the opportunity to see Jay-Sean every day, Sala expressed her gratitude, believing her recovery was due to him. At the same time, Hongjo listened to her words and felt a sense of sadness, as Sala attributed her well-being to Jay-Sean and not to him. At her workplace, Ji-yoon, who used to be very shy, began to converse with her co-workers. She even engaged in conversation with Do-sik, hinting at her growing affection for him. Sala, witnessing this development, was delighted that her two friends were finally becoming closer. When evening came, as Sala returned from work, she spotted Hongjo on the rooftop of Jay-Sean's cafe. Filled with concern, she hastily grabbed a ladder to rescue him. However, by the time she reached the top, Hongjo had already descended. While descending, Sala slipped and fell. Luckily, in his human form, Hongjo managed to save her and their eyes met briefly. When Sala searched for Hongjo again, he had transformed back into a cat and returned home. Later that night, as Sala pondered the man who had saved her, she noticed that Hongjo's eyes bore a striking resemblance with the man. The following day, Hongjo took Sala's toothbrush. It was explained that Hongjo could only transform into a human when he was holding or close to Sala. He took the toothbrush so that he could stay in his human form and accompany Sala. Even on the bus, Hongjo continued to follow Sala, although she felt somewhat uncomfortable with the man tailing her. Yet, because he had saved her the previous day, Sala couldn't protest. Hongjo persisted in following Sala, even to her workplace. Annoyed, Sala scolded Hongjo for his clinginess, prompting him to immediately leave her office. Hongjo then returned to Sala's house, exhausted, and fell asleep without hiding the doll she had given him. Later, when Sala returned home, she was taken aback because she believed she had locked all the doors. Her confusion deepened when she realized her usual toothbrush was missing. Terrified, Sala began to fear that her house might be haunted. In the middle of the night, gripped by fear, Sala accidentally stepped on the doll she had given to the mysterious man. Frightened, she rushed to Jay-Sean's house, seeking his assistance. Jay-Sean then inspected Sala's house, and she recounted the strange occurrences, from the open window to the missing toothbrush, and the presence of the doll she had given to someone. After ensuring everything was safe, before parting ways, Sala invited Jay-Sean to have instant noodles. While Sala was preparing the noodles, she accidentally touched the hot pot, and Jay-Sean attempted to tend to her burn. In that moment, their emotions got the better of them, and they were on the verge of sharing a kiss. Suddenly, Hongjo appeared in his human form. At that very moment, Sala received a call from her stepmother. who informed her that her son would be coming to visit. Her stepmother described her son as a very handsome man 2 years older than Sala. Misunderstanding the situation, Sala believed the person in front of her was her stepbrother. The following day, Sala approached Dusik and explained that she was now living with her stepbrother. She complained about her stepbrother's annoying and clueless behavior. Hearing this, Dusik invited Jae-shan to go to Sala's house that night to teach the person she was referring to a lesson. Afterward, Sala returned home and began cleaning her house. Hanjo always lent a helping hand to Sala, assisting with chores like ironing, taking out the trash, and accompanying her for shopping. When the anticipated night arrived, Jae-shan and Dusik came to Sala's house, eager to confront the person she had mentioned. However, at that moment, Hanjo transformed back into a cat. Consequently, they couldn't find the person Sala was referring to. Since the person wasn't there, they ended up getting drunk together, while Hanjo, in his human form, observed them. While they were intoxicated, Dusik suddenly needed to use the restroom, leaving only Sala and Jae-shan together. During that moment, Sala brought up their past when Jae-shan had inexplicably vanished from her life. It was revealed that in the past, they had officially dated because Jae-shan had kissed Sala. However, following that incident, Jae-shan had disappeared without a word. Sala then sought an explanation from Jae-shan for his abandonment. Regrettably, Jae-shan could only apologize and couldn't provide a clear account of what had transpired back then. As the night grew late and after Jae-shan had departed, Sala uploaded a webtoon she had created. The webtoon depicted the love story between herself and Jae-shan. Filled with confidence, Sala hoped that Jae-shan would come across her webtoon. The following day, all of Sala's colleagues at her office were thrilled because they had discovered Sala's webtoon creation. Meanwhile, Hongjo, who now had the ability to transform into a human at will, was learning from a child how to live as a human. He began with reading, memorizing directions, and learning to eat at a cafe. Hongjo learned everything he needed to adapt to his new human life. At the same time, in celebration of the release of Sala's webtoon, all of her co-workers gathered at Jae-shan's cafe for coffee. During this time, Jae-shan recognized Ji-hoon, who turned out to be a friend from their high school days. Sala revealed that Jae-shan, Dusik, and Ji-hoon had all been in the same high school class, and still had matching rings from that time. Dusik asked Jae-shan for his opinion on Sala's webtoon. Surprisingly, Dusik found the webtoon a bit dull, and Jae-shan suggested that Sala should consider changing the theme of her webtoon. Upon hearing this, Sala felt an immediate sadness, as her webtoon was actually a love story about her feelings for Jae-shan, and he didn't like it. At the same time, Dusik opened Sala's webtoon and received harsh criticism. Confronted with this sobering reality, Sala, deeply affected, bid her colleagues farewell and headed home. Arriving back home, Sala remained profoundly saddened. She even vented her feelings of sadness to Hongjo, who was reading her webtoon. Understanding Sala's distress, Hongjo offered words of encouragement, asserting that her webtoon was excellent because it carried a meaningful message about the essence of life. Hearing someone appreciate her webtoon, Sala promptly invited Hongjo for a drink. During this conversation, Hongjo inquired about the relationship between Sala and Jae-shan. Sala then recounted their brief dating history, how they had been together for just one day. After Jae-shan confessed his love, he mysteriously disappeared, only to reappear in her life repeatedly. She added that despite Jae-shan's inconsistent behavior, he always came back to her. Hongjo then challenged Sala's story, suggesting that it wasn't Jae-shan who kept returning, but rather Sala who clung to the hope of his return. According to Hongjo, Sala's naivety lay in holding on to hope for someone who had abandoned her without explanation. Hearing this, Sala fell into silence and came to the realization that indeed all this time it wasn't Jae-shan who had been returning. She had been the one desperately hoping for his return. With this newfound understanding, Sala approached Jae-shan and promptly demanded an explanation for his past disappearance. Jae-shan remained silent, appearing cold and indifferent, when Sala pleaded for his love. Confronted with the harsh reality of her unreciprocated affection, Sala cried and returned home. The next day, Sala decided to discontinue her webtoon story, feeling that her love story with Jae-sean had truly reached its conclusion. This decision surprised Do-sik, who had assumed Sala was deeply infatuated with Jae-sean. However, Sala now appeared to be someone who had been freed from a painful bond. Meanwhile, Hongjo, now free to transform at will, wandered around the city, attempting to adapt to life as a regular human. At one point, he was lured by the enticing smell of fish and ended up ordering a substantial amount at a restaurant. However, when it came time to settle the bill, Hongjo, who didn't know the process, found himself speechless as the restaurant owner requested payment. With no means to pay, Hongjo was compelled to work at the restaurant, only to discover that it belonged to Do-sik's parents. On a weekend, Do-sik arranged a blind date for Sala. When Sala arrived at the designated meeting place, she was surprised to encounter Hongjo, who was also there for a blind date. They waited together in a park, and over time, Sala realized that Do-sik's arranged blind date was with Hongjo. Despite her initial annoyance, Sala chose to walk alongside Hongjo. During the blind date, it started off somewhat dull, but Hongjo's innocence soon lightened the atmosphere, and they both appeared genuinely happy. Not only that, but Hongjo excelled in a guessing game, and they even bought all the dolls offered as prizes. They returned home in high spirits. When Jae-sean attempted to intervene, Sala paid him no mind and declared her newfound sense of freedom. However, Sala's joy turned to sorrow when Jae-sean mentioned that the cat he had entrusted to someone else would be taken away the next day. Upon hearing this, the cat form Hongjo was deeply shocked and saddened, realizing that he would soon be separated from Sala. On the other hand, Ji-eun had an unexpected encounter with Do-sik while shopping. Do-sik had acquired all the drinks Ji-eun intended to purchase, but he later handed them to her outside, leaving Ji-eun somewhat moved. On her way home, Do-sik followed Ji-eun from behind, wanting to know her address. However, Ji-eun, feeling embarrassed, hurried away as if she were scared. The next day, Sala, who had come to terms with giving her cat away to someone else, gathered all of the cat's belongings. Meanwhile, Hongjo, realizing that he could only transform when holding Sala's belongings, asked her to provide her things for the cat. Although it seemed unusual, Sala complied with Hongjo's request. Because she had to work that day, she had no choice but to leave her cat with Hongjo, who would hand it over to the person taking it. At her workplace, Sala's boss assigned a significant project to all the employees, forming teams to complete it quickly. Sala ended up on the same team as Do-sik and Ji-eun. After returning from work, Sala reached home and immediately began searching for her cat. However, after looking around for a while, she couldn't find him. Since her cat was nowhere to be found at home, Sala headed to the city to search for him. On the opposite side of the street, Hongjo, now back in his cat form, walked sleepily. He returned to Sala's home, where he encountered Jae-sean from outside. In a loud voice, Hongjo asserted that the cat was no longer there. Later on, while walking down the street, Jae-sean accidentally encountered Sala. He immediately scolded her for being careless and allowing her cat to go so easily, likening her actions to abandonment. Sala, feeling indignant, retorted that she hadn't thrown away Hongjo, but rather had thrown away Jae-sean. Upon hearing this, Jae-sean fell silent instantly. Afterward, Sala returned home. While changing her clothes, she found her cat inside the wardrobe drawer. Seeing Hongjo there, Sala burst into tears of joy because she didn't have to part with her cat. Meanwhile, Jae-sean received a call from the person who was supposed to take the cat, informing him of their change of heart. That night, while Sala and Hongjo were asleep, an intruder entered their house. The following day, when Sala opened Hongjo's room, she saw someone with long hair who appeared to be a woman. Sala assumed that Hongjo, who she considered her adopted older brother, had a woman hidden in his room. This incident troubled Sala's mind at work. Around the same time, Jae-sean sent a message inviting Sala to meet later in the evening. In the evening, Sala and Jae-sean met at his cafe. During their meeting, Jae-sean apologized for being excessively harsh with Sala and for considering giving Hongjo the cat to someone else. Suddenly, Hongjo in cat form appeared there. Jae-sean attempted to capture Hongjo, but the cat managed to escape. Not wanting to appear weak in front of Sala, Jae-sean immediately chased after the cat. While searching in the storage room, Jae-shan found a scarf that Sala had worn before. In that moment, Hongjo, now in his human form, took the scarf. The story then flashes back to when Hongjo was still a child. It is revealed that Sala had given the scarf to young Hongjo, who had been in his cat form at the time. One night, as Jae-shan was on his way to meet Sala, he stopped in his tracks when he saw a cat wearing the scarf. It turns out that the reason Jae-shan left Sala back then was because he had chosen to take the cat home. Upon learning this truth, Hongjo, now in his cat human form, fell into silence, considering that it might have been Sala who had abandoned him. As the scarf had been a gift from Sala, Hongjo could only ponder and gaze at her while she slept. The next morning, as Hongjo woke up, he noticed someone fixing the lights in his house. The person was named Bungkook. Bungkook was Sala's stepmother's biological child, and he was aware that Sala was the daughter of his current stepfather. Hongjo realized that if Sala found out that the real Bungkook was not him, it might hurt her, so he always tried to prevent Sala from meeting the genuine Bungkook. After Sala had left, the real Bungkook came downstairs, fortunately without encountering Sala. He asked Hongjo about the strange behavior he had witnessed. Hongjo explained that he had no intention of hiding anything from the beginning. However, this time, he genuinely liked Sala and didn't want to be separated from her. In the evening, Hongjo went to Jae-shan's cafe to retrieve Sala's scarf. At the same time, Sala also went there to look for Hongjo. When Sala entered the storage room, she found the scarf she had given to a young child. Jae-shan then explained that he had found the scarf along with the cat that Sala had discarded. Hearing this, Sala felt puzzled because she remembered not throwing away the scarf, let alone a cat. Jae-shan then explained that the reason he didn't meet Sala at that time was because he saw that the scarf had been thrown away by Sala. However, the scarf was a gift from Jae-shan, which he had used to test Sala's love. Hearing this, Sala felt disappointed, thinking that it was just an excuse and alibi for Jae-shan to break up with her. Sala also stated that if Jae-shan truly loved her, he didn't need to conduct any tests, especially not to claim that their relationship ended because Sala had discarded the scarf he had given her. Sala asked Jae-shan not to blame her for the failure of their relationship and left with the scarf. Outside, Sala met Ji-eun. Feeling troubled, Sala invited Ji-eun to get drunk together. That night, the two of them got drunk and vented their feelings. Even the usually well-behaved Ji-eun was corrupted by Sala, who kept forcing her to drink soju. Sala vented about her failed love story, while Ji-eun shared her feelings for her longtime crush, who happened to be Do-sik. After getting quite drunk, the two of them headed home in a very messy condition. Along the way, they separated because their homes were in different directions. Sala went home severely drunk, and at that point, she was on the verge of passing out. Fortunately, Hongjo managed to support her. Afterward, Sala went home, followed by Hongjo from behind. Meanwhile, Bungkook went to Jae-shan's cafe. When Jae-shan saw Bungkook leaving Sala's house, he inquired about the real identity of Bungkook. Bungkook explained that he was the son of Sala's stepmother. Hearing this, Jae-shan fell silent because he remembered that Hongjo was the son of Sala's stepmother. Meanwhile, inside Sala's house, Hongjo was about to confess that he was not Bungkook. However, before that, Sala requested that Hongjo, whom she regarded as Bungkook, not leave her. Afterward, Sala fainted unconscious. However, at that moment, Jae-shan came in and caught Sala. After putting Sala to sleep, Jae-shan, who had already learned the real identity of Bungkook, that asked who Hongjo really was. Here, Hongjo finally admitted that his name was Hongjo and that he was a cat human. Afterward, Hongjo went to his room and Jae-shan followed him. When Jae-shan opened the door to Hongjo's room, he was shocked because the man who claimed to be Hongjo had transformed into the cat that had always been cared for by Sala. The next day, when Sala woke up, she found Jae-shan sitting in front of her room. Apparently, Jae-shan had not slept all night, guarding Sala's room to prevent Hongjo from entering. During the daytime, Jae-shan continued to keep an eye on Hongjo, until he saw someone acting suspiciously while observing Sala's house. When Jae-shan approached the person, the individual suddenly left. Later, when Jae-shan returned to his cafe, he found that Hongjo, the cat, was no longer there. It turned out that Hongjo had transformed into his human form and flowed. That night, Jae-shan told Sala that he had something very important to say. At that moment, a piece of wood behind Sala was about to fall. Neither Jae-shan nor Sala noticed it until the wood was about to hit Sala and Hongjo in his cat form immediately protected her with his human form. Sola then nursed Hongjo at her home. Afterward, Hongjo, realizing that this couldn't be kept a secret, decided to visit Jae-shan and confess that he was a cat that could transform into a human. Jae-shan asked how Hongjo could transform, and Hongjo answered that he believed he could become human because of Sola. Jae-shan then warned Hongjo to leave immediately and not mess around with Sola. Hongjo begged Jae-shan not to tell Sola and promised not to become human again, as long as Jae-shan didn't abandon him. The next day, to keep an eye on Hongjo, Jae-shan made him an employee at his cafe. On that day, Ji-eun came to the office with packed lunches. When lunch break arrived, Ji-eun invited Sola and Do-sik to eat together. As they were about to eat, Sola intentionally said she needed to use the restroom, giving them some private time. By accident, something fell from Ji-eun's bag. Do-sik, curious, pressed Ji-eun to be honest about whether she liked him or not. And surprisingly, Ji-eun confessed that she really liked Do-sik. Ji-eun, feeling embarrassed, then left, and what had fallen was Do-sik's eraser from their high school days. When night fell outside Sola's house, there was a mysterious person who had been observing the house the previous day. Jae-shan and Hongjo approached the person, and it turned out that the individual had come to propose to Sola. Hongjo immediately held Sola's hand, and Jae-shan witnessed it. Hongjo then warned the mysterious person not to mess with Sola. Afterward, at her house, Sola washed the dishes and tidied up her home. At that moment, Hongjo helped Sola in a very romantic manner. During this time, Sola opened up about her mother, who had passed away, and the next day was the day when she would commemorate her mother's death. Hongjo, upon hearing this, felt sympathetic. As a sign of his sympathy, Hongjo invited Sola to commemorate her mother's death together the next day. The next day, Hongjo asked Jae-shan for permission not to work for a while because he had something to do with Sola. However, Jae-shan didn't grant his request. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Sola, who had just returned from work, was waiting for Hongjo at their agreed-upon meeting place. At that moment, after finishing work, Hongjo rushed to join Sola. However, before doing so, he went to look for peaches as a gift he intended to give to Sola. Hongjo continued to search until nightfall. On the other hand, Sola, who had been waiting impatiently for Hongjo, finally smiled when someone arrived. Unfortunately, it turned out that the person was not Hongjo but Jae-shan. Jae-shan took advantage of the moment and once again tried to persuade Sola to reconcile with him. Jae-shan asked if they could go back to being friends like in the past. Meanwhile, Hongjo, who was extremely tired and couldn't hold his human form any longer, fainted and transformed into a cat. On the other hand, as Jae-shan was on his way home, he accidentally found Hongjo's necklace. There he also discovered various canned peach drinks. Jae-shan was convinced that Hongjo had already transformed into a cat and had surely been taken by someone else. Upon learning this, Jae-shan immediately went to see Sola and informed her that Hongjo had been kidnapped. Panicked, Sola immediately began searching for the whereabouts of Hongjo. They had visited various places, but unfortunately, the results were still negative. Their search had been going on for 2 days, but they hadn't found Hongjo yet. Then, one evening on their way back, they encountered the mysterious person who had been terrorizing Sola's house the other day. Jae-shan was very suspicious of the person's actions. Feeling cornered, the person immediately fled. Sola and Jae-shan chased after the person and discovered that this individual was the one who had taken Hongjo. The person quickly hid Hongjo because they were afraid that Sola and Jae-shan would find him. After hiding Hongjo, not long after, the person was shocked to find a man inside their house. Hongjo, being a fellow cat species who didn't like to be confined, immediately released the other cats. However, at that moment, the person stabbed Hongjo with a knife, injuring his hand. From outside, Sola and Jae-shan were trying to open the door to the house. When Sola managed to enter, Hongjo, realizing that Sola was there, immediately transformed back into a cat, and the mysterious person witnessed the event. Hongjo was then taken to a veterinarian due to his injuries. The veterinarian staff said that the cat needed to be treated there, so Sola reluctantly left Hongjo there. Later, when Sola returned home, she met Hongjo, who she still considered her stepbrother Bangkook. Disappointed that Hongjo hadn't kept his promise, she ignored him. In a room, Sola regretted Hongjo's behavior, despite having eagerly anticipated his arrival the other day. Outside the room, Hongjo felt remorseful and could only contemplate his fate, fearing that Sola might come to despise him. The following day at her workplace, Sola couldn't focus and kept thinking about Hongjo, whom she still regarded as her stepbrother Bangkok. She even repeatedly called Jae-shan just to inquire about Hongjo's condition, the innocent man who had now become a part of her life. As evening approached after work, Sola went to Jae-shan's cafe. There Jae-shan gave her a peach and mentioned that Hongjo was late in keeping his promise, because at that time, Hongjo had been searching for the rarest peach to give to Sola. Instantly, Sola remembered that when they made the appointment, she had told Hongjo that her late mother loved peaches. At the office, Sola, Ji-hoon, and Do-steek were required to complete their project quickly. Therefore, the three of them had to work overtime to fulfill the client's wishes. At a moment when Sola was lost in thought, contemplating a life that had occasionally disappointed her, Hongjo approached her from behind. At that moment, Hongjo said that he would leave Sola's life and never return. He added that he would leave with someone he deeply cared about. Hearing this, Sola was greatly shocked because she had actually fallen in love with Hongjo, whom she regarded as Bangkok. Sola returned home with a broken heart, but after seeing her cat, her mood suddenly changed. While preparing food for Hongjo, Sola poured out her feelings. She admitted that she truly loved Bangkok and would continue to cherish her love no matter what. Unbeknownst to her, Hongjo in his human form listened to her heartfelt confession from behind. Then, while Sola was outside, she saw Hongjo on the rooftop. Hongjo invited Sola to enjoy the full moon together. At that moment, Sola asked about Hai's plans to leave her for someone he loved. However, Hongjo remained silent and kissed Sola instead. The next day, Hongjo went to the park and encountered a cat. With all his heart, he planned to reveal his true identity to Sola. However, before he could do so, the cat suddenly transformed into an old woman. The old woman instructed Hongjo not to tell Sola that he was a cat. She explained that once Hongjo could no longer transform into a human, Sola would hate him in his cat form. Suddenly, Hongjo realized the gravity of the situation and became despondent. He confided in Jae-shan, who also advised him not to tell Sola and to continue being with her in his cat form. When evening arrived after work, Hongjo immediately took Sola to the rooftop of his house. There he firmly requested that they spend this day alone because the next day, he would leave to travel the world and never return to Sola. Upon hearing this, Sola's expression instantly turned sad. The next day, Hongjo saw a webtoon drawing by Sola depicting the story of Sola and Hongjo the cat. However, Sola closed the laptop. Despite feeling disappointed, Sola strengthened herself, bid farewell to Hongjo, and explained that she had to work and couldn't accompany him to the airport. Afterward, Sola left with a weary expression. At her office, Sola, who continued to think about Hongjo, didn't respond when her friends tried to chat with her. Then, when night fell, Sola deliberately didn't return home and waited for Hongjo to depart first because she couldn't bear to see him leave. Meanwhile, at Sola's house, Hongjo waited for Sola while drinking coffee to stay awake. If he fell asleep, he would transform into a cat. Until midnight, Sola finally arrived home and was welcomed by Hongjo, who decided not to leave her. Inside the house, Hongjo explained that he wouldn't leave until the drawing Sola had created for her latest webtoon was completed. Then, one night, while Sola and Hongjo were enjoying each other's company, Jae-shan, in a drunken state, invited them to discuss something. In that moment, heavily intoxicated, Jae-shan nearly blurted out the truth about Hongjo. However, before that happened, Sola's stepmother called him. She urged Sola to visit her parents because her father's birthday was approaching over the weekend. Her stepmother requested that Sola bring Bangkok along. Upon hearing this, Hongjo was immediately silenced, as he felt that the truth might soon be revealed. On the weekend, Sola, who was about to visit her parents, was stopped by Hongjo. He told her that he wouldn't accompany her to visit her parents and explained that he would depart on a journey, even though Sola's latest webtoon wasn't finished yet. Upon hearing his words, Sola fell silent, realizing that she couldn't stop Hongjo from leaving. Upon reaching the train station, Sola immediately called Jae-shan to let him know that she would be going and entrusted her house to him because Hongjo, whom she considered Bangkok, would be leaving that day. Upon hearing this, Jae-shan hurriedly went to the train station to catch up with Sola. Upon arrival, Jae-shan immediately said that he would accompany Sola and never leave her alone again. Sola, confused, could only remain silent. However, at that moment, she was shocked to see Hongjo approaching from behind. The story then rewinds a few hours earlier, in the morning when Sola was saying her goodbyes. She showed her completed webtoon to Hongjo. In a loud voice, Sola expressed her love for Hongjo, whom she regarded as Bangkok, her stepbrother. Returning to the present, Hongjo's arrival was actually to reveal his true identity. However, before that, Sola's stepmother suddenly called her, informing her that Bangkok had arrived at their house. Hearing this, Sola was shocked and confused because she believed Bangkok was in front of her. Then, on the train, Hongjo, realizing that the truth had been exposed, bravely told Sola that he wasn't Bangkok but rather her cat, Hongjo. However, Sola, hearing this, couldn't believe it because it seemed impossible to her. She still considered Hongjo to be Bangkok and invited him to go to a beach to watch the sunset. On the other hand, it turned out that Sola's webtoon had already been released, and Ji-eun and all the other employees were currently reading it. There it was evident that this time all of Sola's friends greatly enjoyed her webtoon story. Returning to Sola, upon arriving at her parents' house, she lost sight of Hongjo, who suddenly disappeared. Sola and Jae-shan were warmly greeted by her stepmother. Sola then wanted to explain about Bangkok, who had been with her every day. However, before she could, the real Bangkok entered the room, and her stepmother introduced the real Bangkok to Jae-shan and Sola. Learning that the one who had been with her all this time was not the real Bangkok, Sola was in shock and disbelief. To calm her mind, Sola excused herself to go outside, and Jae-shan immediately followed her. Outside, Sola asked who the real Bangkok was and who had been living in her house all this time. Reluctantly, Jae-shan told Sola that the person who had been with her was Hongjo, the cat human. Hearing this, Sola still couldn't accept it and had a hard time believing. Disappointed, she walked away, leaving Jae-shan behind. On the riverbank, Sola found solace, reminiscing about her moments with Hongjo, the plain man who had enriched her life. Not long after, the real Bangkok came and brought a coat for Sola. Here, accompanied by the real Bangkok, Sola continued to cry while lamenting her repeated failures in love. Bangkok tried to lighten the mood by asking if Sola was crying because of Hongjo or something else. Bangkok then recounted how they had met when he returned to his old home. Sola then asked if Bangkok had met Hongjo, the cat human. She added that she had always been with Bangkok, even sharing meals. However, the person with her wasn't Bangkok but her own cat, who could transform into a human. Sola affirmed that she was now very confused because she had already fallen in love with the cat human. Hearing all this, Bangkok wasn't surprised or confused. For him, love was a miracle, and loving a cat was not an impossibility. Upon hearing this, Sola had a moment of enlightenment. Afterwards, Sola, who had a prior arrangement with Hongjo, went to a beach. There she found Hongjo sitting alone, reminiscing about their romantic moments. Sola approached him, and though it was difficult, she had to accept the reality that she loved the cat human. Elsewhere, Ji-eun accidentally met Do-sik at a bus stop. She felt embarrassed having to wait with Do-sik, but they ended up taking the same bus. On the bus, Do-sik invited Ji-eun to go somewhere with him. They went to a restaurant owned by Do-sik's parents. After their meal, they went to a library. There, Do-sik kept dropping hints to Ji-eun that he wanted to date her. Unfortunately, Ji-eun, being a cold and naive woman, didn't notice Do-sik's hints. However, after waiting for a long time, Do-sik finally confessed his feelings, and they officially started dating. Elsewhere, Sola, Jae-shan, and her parents were celebrating her father's birthday. They were laughing and singing together joyfully. Meanwhile, Hongjo could only watch from the outside. Several days had passed, and Sola had returned home. In front of Do-sik's parents' restaurant, Sola met Ji-eun and was immediately invited inside. Once inside, both Do-sik and Ji-eun openly announced that they were officially dating. This surprised and delighted Sola. When Sola returned from the restaurant, she met Hongjo, who now lived in Jae-shan's house. Awkwardness was evident between them. They seemed like strangers. Before heading to work, Sola, who was used to seeing Hongjo before leaving, felt an immense loss. Even when she saw Hongjo's forgotten cell phone, the pain deepened. Unable to bear the sadness alone, Sola decided to confide in Ji-eun. There, Sola shared everything about Hongjo, from their first meeting to the present. Sola was truly perplexed and torn between pursuing a relationship with a cat human or letting go of her feelings. As Sola was on her way home, she once again encountered Hongjo, who faithfully awaited her return. Unfortunately, at that time, Sala still couldn't accept Honjo. She consistently avoided him when he approached. Late at night, Honjo sneaked into Sala's house just to make sure she was okay. As Sala slept, Honjo, aware that he might not be accepted by her anymore, could only reflect on his fate. At that moment, Sala suddenly woke up and saw Honjo there. Sala then asked how long Honjo would keep following her. Honjo, who now deeply loved Sala, said he would continue to be with her for as long as he could. Sala, unable to part with Honjo, gave him permission to hug her. From then on, their relationship was restored. They laughed and were happy together once more. However, at the end of their conversation, Honjo mentioned that his life wouldn't be long, and he would die soon. Despite being able to transform into a cat human, he couldn't have the same lifespan as humans. Honjo also explained that one day, very soon, he would leave Sala forever. He asked Sala to give him a little more time to play together. The next day, to spend time with Honjo, Sala took him somewhere. Honjo always accompanied Sala in creating her webtoon stories. He even sacrificed sleep to take care of and be there for Sala. One day, Honjo encountered the old cat woman again. She said something to him, causing a change in his expression. Whatever the old woman said, something significant was about to happen to Honjo very soon. The next day, at Jaeshan's cafe, all of Sala's friends celebrated her success in publishing her latest webtoon comic. While decorating the room, Honjo noticed something outside and chased after it. Outdoors, he found the mysterious person who had visited recently, asking about Sala's cat. Honjo, not wanting to be separated from Sala, threatened the person not to disturb her. As night fell, Sala's success party began. When they were about to eat together, Sala's friends asked if she and Honjo were dating. With joy, Sala informed everyone that they were officially dating. However, when they were about to toast, Honjo suddenly had a headache and felt dizzy. Jaeshan noticed that Honjo was about to transform into a cat and immediately told him to get the cake so that the people there wouldn't witness the change. In the storage room, Honjo, unable to bear the pain, transformed into a cat. Fortunately, Sala saw what happened. Sala, realizing that Honjo was in distress, immediately took him to the veterinarian. After receiving treatment, Sala returned home with the others. At that moment, Dusik only just learned that Honjo was a cat human. They all intended to accompany Sala during that time. However, because Honjo had returned to being a human, Sala told them to go home. Alone with Honjo, Sala asked him not to force himself to become human. She was worried that if Honjo kept pushing himself, he might lose the ability to turn into a human. Hearing Sala express her concern deeply touched Honjo. This time, he saw Sala truly accepting him for who he was. One day, Jaeshan's father, who was suffering from a severe illness, passed away. During the mourning period, Sala approached Jaeshan, who was sitting alone. There, Sala brought up Honjo, who appeared very weak. Jaeshan explained that Honjo had been forcing himself to remain a cat human to wait for Sala. On the days before, Sala hadn't fully accepted Honjo as a cat human, and realizing this made her very sad. She understood the tremendous risk that Honjo was taking, all in the hope that she would eventually accept him. To make amends for her guilt, Sala quit her job and dedicated herself to becoming a famous webtoon writer. Honjo continued to accompany Sala while she worked. One day, during a break, they took a nap together. As Honjo slept, Sala cried, fearing that time would soon separate them. One day, Sala received an interview offer from a media outlet because her webtoon had become trending in Korea. The following day, Sala and Honjo went for the interview session together. Initially, the interview went smoothly and Sala appeared very happy. However, when Sala noticed that Honjo wasn't there, the atmosphere changed. On the other side, Honjo was buying a necklace to give to Sala. Meanwhile, during the interview, Sala, deeply concerned about Honjo, disregarded the interview and immediately went to find him. Outside, Sala met Honjo, who gave her the necklace he had just purchased. Unfortunately, Sala, still worried, didn't respond to Honjo's gift. As night fell, Sala told Honjo to transform into a cat and go to sleep. She didn't want him to fall ill due to lack of sleep. Honjo then said that he would become a cat and sleep, but that it might be for a long time. Therefore, he asked Sala to accept his gift. Honjo asked Sala not to take off the necklace, because it would be a symbol that their togetherness would never end, even though he would leave Sala. Several days passed and Sala, was feeling down, Hongjo approached her and invited her to go somewhere because his time was running out. They went to the banks of the Han River where they had first met. There, Hongjo put on the scarf that Sola had given him when he was a child. Hongjo then bid farewell because from that point on, he would be a cat forever. However, Sola couldn't accept it and refused to understand. Nevertheless, Hongjo reassured Sola to stay strong and continue living her life, even though her life would no longer include his presence by her side. 2 years have passed and Hongjo hasn't turned back into a human. However, despite that, Sola appears happy because she can still be with Hongjo, even in his cat form. Sola now has successfully achieved her dream of becoming a famous webtoon writer. In fact, many people now asked for her autograph. On the day of the official unveiling of her comic character, Jae-shan arrived, bringing a bouquet of flowers for Sola. Jae-shan inquired about Hongjo's current condition and asked about how Sola was coping after parting with Hongjo's human form. Unfortunately, Sola couldn't answer Jae-shan's questions. Until one day, when Sola was lost in thought along the banks of the Han River, she was approached by Jae-shan, who still hoped that Sola would give him a little bit of her love. However, Sola firmly stated that she would continue to wait for Hongjo until the end of her life. After that encounter, Sola returned home. After putting away the scarf given by Hongjo, suddenly from behind, Sola saw Hongjo transform back into a human, and Hongjo would remain human forever. The story came to an end. Moral lesson from the story: love can be as tricky as trying to ask a cat to buy peaches, but if you keep chasing your dreams, you might end up with a perfectly happy ending.